Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision,
Oh, absolutely.
Like it feels like engineering, you break your arm, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on a glowing screen, right?
Right.
And the doctor just points and says, there it is, there's the fracture.
Because it's entirely binary. I mean, the fracture exists in physical space. We can measure it, and we can just apply a mechanical fix.
Exactly. But then, you step into the world of human behavior, into our internal lives, and man, that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Oh, 100%. It's totally useless.
We're looking at an internal landscape that is incredibly murky. And I mean, we all know this. Anyone listening to this deep dive right now who has ever tried to figure out why a really simple, like offhand comment from a coworker just derailed their entire week.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. You know that the human mind does not offer clean diagnostic images.
No, it really doesn't. Because the problem is it's entirely internal. So we lack that screen to point to. We're dealing with an architecture that's built out of, subjective experiences and these really fleeting physiological states, plus ingrained cognitive patterns.
Which brings us to our mission for you today. We are pulling from a really highly concentrated source for this deep dive. It's a distillation of the book Master Your Emotions by Thibaut Meurisse.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating summary.
It really is. Now, this summary, it manages to condense an entire philosophy of emotional mastery into just like 7 core principles and a conclusion. It is elegantly brief.
Very brief, almost deceptively so.
Exactly. Brevity can be totally deceptive because the challenge isn't reading the principles, right? The challenge is that actually applying them requires this fundamental rewriting of how you process reality on, say, a Tuesday morning.
Right, when your alarm doesn't go off.
Yes, when the alarm fails and your inbox is already overflowing and you're just stressed.
That's the real test.
So we're going to unpack the mechanics of this framework, not just what you should do, but the psychological and cognitive why behind it, so you can actually use it to, shortcut your path to a calmer, happier life.
And the text opens with a premise that, on the surface, feels universally understood by anyone who, pays even a little attention to their own psychology. It says, emotions shape your life.
Right.
They affect decisions, actions, and relationships. Now, we already know we aren't perfectly rational creatures, right?
Right.
Like we aren't acting like algorithms.
God, no. Not at all.
But what this framework forces us to look at is the microscopic, often invisible level at which this actually operates. It's not just about the big dramatic emotions.
Like profound grief or, explosive anger.
Exactly. It's about the subtle, low-grade background hum of our emotional state.
Let's unpack that micro-level impact, because the text lays out a really specific sequence here. It goes, a feeling dictates a decision, right? The decision becomes an action, and the action shapes the relationship.
Yeah, it's a chain reaction.
I'm thinking about how insidious this is when we believe we're engaging in pure logic. Like, okay, let's say you sit down to write a project proposal.
Okay.
You think you are evaluating data and making a really rational business case.
Of course you do.
But if there is a lingering, just unacknowledged insecurity from a meeting 2 hours prior, the framework suggests that feeling is actually acting as a filter.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. It might cause you to unconsciously use defensive language in the proposal, which changes how your manager receives it, which then, alters the trajectory of your entire career.
Yeah, the insecurity basically acts as a hidden variable in your cognitive math.
Wow. A hidden variable.
In behavioral psychology, there's a concept closely related to this. It's called the somatic marker hypothesis.
Wait, somatic marker what?
Hypothesis. Yeah, it suggests that emotional processes actually guide behavior, particularly decision-making.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, your brain tags certain scenarios with a somatic marker.
Yeah.
It's a physical feeling, like a knot in the stomach or, a flutter in the chest.
Right, okay.
So when you sit down to write that proposal, the residual stress from that previous meeting acts as a negative somatic marker. Your brain, which is just trying to protect you from further discomfort, right, it subtly steers your vocabulary towards self-preservation rather than, say, innovation.
So you think you are choosing words based on strategy?
Exactly. You think it's strategy, but you're actually choosing them based on a biological imperative to soothe a background anxiety.
It is essentially an invisible operating system running in the background. Like we are staring at the application on the screen, right? The proposal, the email, the conversation with the partner.
Yeah.
And we think we are consciously typing the code. But the OS is dictating how much processing power that application gets, what external data it's allowed to pull in, and how it renders on the screen.
That OS analogy holds up incredibly well when you consider how deeply integrated emotions are into our sensory processing. The feeling isn't an afterthought. I mean, it is the lens through which the initial data is interpreted.
But I want to introduce some friction here on behalf of anyone listening who might feel a little sense of claustrophobia hearing this.
Okay, that's good.
If my invisible emotional OS is running the show, right, and filtering my quote-unquote logical decisions without my conscious consent, doesn't that render us somewhat powerless?
That's a scary thought.
Right. If feelings dictate everything from microactions to major life relationships, it sounds highly deterministic. Am I just like a passenger in the vehicle of my own neurochemistry?
You know, the discomfort in that realization is exactly the pivot point of the entire framework. It really is.
Okay, how so?
Well, it feels deterministic only if you remain unconscious of the operating system.
Ah,
The text leverages the sheer, terrifying magnitude of that emotional power to justify its next mandate, which is the absolute necessity of observation.
okay.
It's saying, because this system is dictating your reality, you can no longer afford to be a passive user.
Yeah.
You have to open the terminal and actually look at the code.
Right, right. So this is where the concept of awareness comes in.
Exactly. This is where it introduces the directive to recognize your emotions before attempting to control them.
Yeah.
And, crucially, to understand them calmly rather than suppressing them.
Awareness as a prerequisite. I mean, it makes logical sense. You can't fix a bug in the code if you don't know which line it's on.
You really can't.
But the text draws a very hard line between understanding calmly and suppressing.
It does.
And for someone in the middle of a high-stress scenario, those two things might feel identical. Like if I'm sitting in a meeting and a colleague takes credit for my work,
The worst.
right, my immediate goal is to not start yelling.
Naturally.
So if I sit there silently, just swallowing the anger, I might think I am doing the right thing. I'm controlling it. But the text suggests suppression is actually a critical failure.
It is. Because suppression is an act of internal violence.
Yeah.
And neurologically speaking, it is incredibly expensive.
Expensive.
Well, when you suppress an emotion, you are essentially engaging the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical reasoning part of your brain in a wrestling match with the amygdala, the emotional center.
Okay.
You're using massive amounts of cognitive energy to build a dam against a flood.
Mm-hmm.
And the research on this, which is often referred to as the ironic process theory or the white bear problem.
All the classic, don't think of a white bear.
Exactly. It shows that actively trying to suppress a thought or feeling actually makes it more salient in your mind.
So suddenly all you see are white bears.
Precisely the mechanism.
Mm.
Furthermore, while you might look calm on the outside in that meeting, your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive.
Oh, right. Like heart racing.
Yeah. Your cortisol levels are spiking, your blood pressure is up. You haven't deactivated the emotion at all, you've just trapped it in a pressurized container.
Wow.
The text's alternative, which is understanding calmly, is a completely different neurological pathway.
Okay, I want to find a better way to visualize this than the usual cliches. Let's think of it like a triage nurse in a busy emergency room.
Okay, I like that.
Right. When a patient comes in bleeding and screaming, which represents the intense emotion, like that anger at the coworker, the triage nurse doesn't try to instantly cure the patient at the front desk. That's impossible.
Right.
But the nurse also doesn't lock the patient in a supply closet to quiet them down, which would be suppression.
No, the nurse's job is purely observational and categorical.
Right. The nurse looks at the wound, assesses the vitals, and logs the severity. Like, okay, we have a laceration, pulse is elevated, patient is distressed.
Yeah.
The nurse acknowledges the reality of the situation with absolute professional detachment.
That professional detachment is the defining characteristic of understanding calmly.
Okay.
So when that colleague takes credit for your work, rather than suppressing the urge to yell, you step into the role of the triage nurse for your own mind.
You observe the internal state.
Yes. You mentally note, I am experiencing a severe spike of anger. My jaw is clenching, and I feel a threat to my professional standing. This process is actually known as affect labeling.
Affect labeling.
Yeah. And when you assign a linguistic label to an emotional experience, neuroimaging shows that activity in the amygdala actually decreases, while activity in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex increases.
Really? So just by naming it?
By simply naming the emotion objectively, you are mechanically turning down the heat.
That is wild. So you are creating a buffer zone. It's like a microscopic sliver of space between the stimulus and your response.
Exactly.
You aren't curing the anger at the front desk, but you are categorizing it so it doesn't just, run wild through the hospital.
Beautifully put.
But, okay, this raises a major structural question about the framework.
All right.
If I am the triage nurse and I'm watching all these emotional patients flood into the ER, the anger, the anxiety, the subtle insecurities, who is sending them?
Ah.
Like, where is this endless stream of feeling actually originating before it hits my awareness?
See, this is where the framework introduces its most paradigm-shifting mechanism.
Okay, lay it on me.
The text identifies the exact source of the flood. It says, thoughts create feelings. It explicitly states that negative thinking often creates stress and sadness.
Wow. Okay, this challenges the fundamental way most people experience life.
It really does.
Because we tend to view emotions as spontaneous environmental reactions, right? Like, a bad thing happens, therefore I feel sad. The event is the cause, the emotion is the effect.
Right, that's the standard assumption.
But this text inserts a crucial, invisible middle step.
Yeah, and the cognitive appraisal theory is the psychological engine behind this idea.
Okay, explain that.
An external event is, objectively speaking, neutral data. It's just a sequence of physics and sound waves and light. It only gains emotional resonance when your brain appraises it, interprets it, and tells a story about it.
A story.
The feeling is just the physiological output of the story you just told yourself.
Let's ground this in a really specific scenario, just so we can see how the gears turn here. Imagine two different people, person A and person B.
Okay.
Both of them receive the exact same email from their boss at, let's say, 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. And the email says, we need to have a serious talk about your current project on Monday morning.
Oh, a perfectly ambiguous external event.
Perfectly ambiguous, right. So person A reads that email, and their immediate internal narrative, their thought is, I'm getting fired. The project is a disaster. My boss hates me. I'm going to lose my income.
Immediate panic.
Exactly. And the physiological response to that narrative is a massive dump of adrenaline and cortisol. Their weekend is entirely ruined. They can't sleep. They are paralyzed by stress.
Right.
Now, person B reads the exact same text on the screen. But their internal narrative is, okay, the project hit a snag, and the boss wants to brainstorm a pivot on Monday. This is a chance to show I can handle turbulence.
A completely different appraisal.
Yes. Their physiological response might be, a slight elevation in focus, maybe mild anticipation, but not crippling anxiety.
And notice the external data, the email, was identical. The divergence in the emotional reality was entirely manufactured by the thought. The text isn't just offering a philosophical musing here. It is handing you, the listener, the ultimate diagnostic tool.
Because you can trace it back.
Yes. If you are experiencing acute stress and sadness, you don't look at the boss. You don't look at the email. You look at the narrative you generated in the milliseconds after reading it.
But I have to push back here because I feel like this concept can be easily weaponized or at least misunderstood in a harmful way.
That's a fair point. How so?
Well, if the text asserts that negative thinking creates stress and that thoughts create feelings, does that mean every instance of emotional pain is just a self-inflicted wound? Right? Like, if someone is dealing with a genuinely toxic workplace or structural financial hardship or, I don't know, a chronic illness, is the framework implying that their stress is their own fault for not having better thoughts?
Yeah, I see where you're going.
There's a fine line between cognitive empowerment and just toxic positivity.
That is a vital distinction to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it hinges on the difference between moral blame and mechanical source.
Mechanical source.
The framework is not dealing in blame. Blame is backward-looking, right? It's punitive. Blame says your situation is bad, and because you're having negative thoughts about it, you are failing.
Right, which feels terrible.
Exactly. But identifying the mechanical source is forward-looking and pragmatic.
Walk me through the mechanics of that pragmatism, then.
Let's take your chronic illness example. The physical pain and the actual limitations of the illness are objective, external realities. They're the baseline data. The framework does not suggest you can just think your way out of biological reality.
You can't just positive affirmation away a broken leg.
Exactly. However, the suffering, that secondary layer of deep despair, the feeling of hopelessness, the stress that actually exacerbates the physical symptoms that is generated by the cognitive narrative attached to the illness. A thought like, my life is entirely ruined and I will never experience joy again, generates a profound neurochemical cascade of despair.
So the primary pain is the illness, but the secondary suffering is the thought about the illness.
Yes. By identifying that the thought is creating that secondary layer of profound stress. The text isn't blaming the individual. It's actually offering them the only lever of power they have in that situation.
Because you can't instantly cure the illness.
Right. But if you recognize the narrative, you can intercept the secondary suffering. You can shift the thought to, this is incredibly difficult, but I can still find small moments of peace today.
Wow.
The goal isn't to be blindly positive.
Yeah.
It is to stop actively compounding your own misery through these unchecked cognitive loops.
It's about reclaiming agency where agency actually exists.
Exactly.
Which honestly provides a perfect structural bridge to the next phase of the summary. Because once you recognize that thoughts fuel the emotional engine, you are faced with a massive resource allocation problem.
You really are.
Right. If we're constantly generating narratives and those narratives are generating physical emotional states, we are burning an astonishing amount of cognitive energy.
There's burden through it.
So the text addresses this by drawing an absolute impermeable boundary around where that energy should go.
It introduces a ruthless economy of attention. The directive is to focus on control, and explicitly to spend energy only on things you can control.
That word only is doing heavy lifting there.
It really is.
It doesn't say try to prioritize what you can control. It says if an element falls outside your sphere of influence, your energy expenditure on it should be zero.
Absolute zero. Because the human brain has a finite amount of metabolic bandwidth available for decision-making and emotional regulation each day.
Right, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's a concept often related to ego depletion. Though even if we just look at basic cognitive load, the resources are strictly limited.
So when you waste it.
When you invest energy in ruminating over the macroeconomic climate or, agonizing over what a stranger thinks of your outfit
Right.
or fuming at the traffic congestion on your commute,
You're just draining the battery.
you are literally siphoning glucose and oxygen away from the prefrontal cortex. You're burning high-octane fuel while sitting in neutral.
I think of it like an air traffic controller.
Oh, that's a great visual.
You're sitting in the tower, right? You have planes coming in from all directions. But you cannot control the weather systems forming 100 miles away. You cannot control a mechanical failure on a plane.
No.
You can't control how many passengers showed up late to the gate. And if you spend your shift screaming at the radar screen because a storm is brewing, planes are going to crash.
Because your attention is completely consumed by the uncontrollable.
Exactly. The only thing the air traffic controller can control is the sequencing of the planes currently in their airspace. They manage the flow.
Right.
The text is demanding that we become ruthless air traffic controllers of our own energy. We have to audit every single thought and ask, is this the weather or is this a plane I can land?
And the text explicitly defines the ultimate plane we can land.
Yeah.
It points directly to personal responsibility.
Yes.
It specifically states that you are responsible for managing your reactions. In the entire sprawling chaos of human existence, your reaction is the only piece of real estate you actually hold the deed to.
I want to dig into the specific phrasing there, managing your reactions, because it connects back to our triage nurse and the buffer zone we talked about.
It does.
It doesn't say you are responsible for preventing the initial feeling. It places the locus of control squarely in the space after the stimulus hits.
This is where all the previous concepts kind of synthesize.
Okay, walk us through it.
The external event happens. The boss sends the email.
Right.
The operating system fires off a somatic marker. You get a spike of anxiety.
The heart races.
The cognitive narrative begins to form, I'm going to be fired. All of this happens in milliseconds. And the framework acknowledges this automatic cascade.
You can't start that initial wave.
No, the point of personal responsibility isn't to pretend the cascade didn't happen. It is stepping into that sliver of space, looking at the anxiety calmly, recognizing the negative thought, and then choosing the behavioral output.
So the reaction is the output.
Yes, the reaction might be taking 5 deep breaths before opening the email. It might be drafting an angry response and then deleting it and then writing a professional one.
Or just stepping away from the desk.
That might be going for a walk, yeah. Managing the reaction is the physical manifestation of emotional mastery. You reclaim the energy you would have wasted panicking about the boss's mood, which is the uncontrollable weather, and you invest 100% of it into executing a calm, strategic response, which is landing the plane.
Man, this all forms an incredibly robust, airtight psychological theory. We understand the OS, we observe with the triage nurse, we identify the cognitive narrative, we draw the boundary around our energy, and we own our reactions.
It's very comprehensive.
It makes perfect logical sense when we are discussing it here in a controlled environment.
Right.
And this is a but I have to bring the listener's reality back into the room.
Okay.
It's actually executing this level of hypervigilance over every thought and reaction, every hour of the day.
Yeah.
It sounds exhausting.
It sounds impossible.
It sounds like a full-time job just to manage the mind. If the system requires constant conscious effort, it is going to fail the exact moment we get tired or hungry.
If it relied purely on conscious effort, it would absolutely fail.
Right.
The prefrontal cortex tires way too quickly for that. But the text anticipates this biological limitation, which is why the final piece of the framework shifts away from internal theory and focuses entirely on external architecture.
External architecture.
It introduces the maintenance protocol.
Building positive habits.
Exactly.
The text explicitly links healthy routines to improving emotional balance and ultimately concludes that this leads to a calmer, happier, and more successful life.
This is the neuroscience of automation.
Automation, I like that.
The goal of building habits is to transfer the burden of emotional regulation from the effortful, energy-hungry prefrontal cortex, what Daniel Kahneman calls System 2 thinking,
Okay.
to the automatic, low-energy basal ganglia, which is System 1.
So shifting it from hard work to background process.
Right. When you repeat a behavior, the neural pathways associated with that behavior actually undergo myelination.
Myelination.
Yeah, the myelin sheath around the nerves thickens. It insulates the circuit and makes the signal travel faster and with way less effort.
Oh, it's the physical construction of muscle memory.
Yes. The text is advocating for the creation of routines that physically wire your brain for stability.
But what does that actually look like in practice? Because a healthy routine sounds like, eating your vegetables or going to the gym, which are great, obviously.
Sure.
But how does that directly automate the complex emotional triage we've been discussing?
Well, the routines act as behavioral scaffolding. Let's say you build a non-negotiable morning routine of 10 minutes of mindfulness or cognitive journaling. You are practicing the act of observing your thoughts objectively, the triage nurse skill in a low-stakes environment.
Oh, I see.
You're strengthening that neural pathway every single day. Or perhaps your routine is a strict digital sunset, right?
Yeah.
Putting your phone away an hour before bed.
I desperately need to do that.
We all do. But by doing that, you are systematically reducing the external stimuli that trigger negative cognitive loops.
You are preloading the operating system with a baseline of stability.
Exactly.
If you practice finding that buffer zone every morning when you are calm, the pathway is already paved and ready when the high-stress email arrives at 4:30 p.m.
That's it, exactly.
You don't have to hack your way through the jungle to find the calm response. You just take the paved road you've been walking every day.
And this directly answers the final promise of the text's conclusion.
Which is?
How does this lead to a more successful life? It comes down to the compounding returns of reclaimed bandwidth.
The energy economy again?
Exactly. Imagine a person who has not mastered these concepts. They spend, let's say, 40% of their daily cognitive energy suppressing uncomfortable feelings.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Then they spend another 40% ruminating on uncontrollable external events and spinning catastrophic narratives.
So they've used 80% of their battery.
Right. That leaves them with 20% of their mental bandwidth to actually do their job, build their relationships, and pursue their goals.
Which is why we all feel so burned out.
Exactly. Now apply the framework. Through daily routines, they automate the observation and acceptance of emotion. They ruthlessly cut funding to uncontrollable anxieties.
Wow. Suddenly they have 80 or 90% of their bandwidth available.
Exactly.
The routines aren't generating the success directly. The routines are eliminating the internal friction.
That's a great way to put it.
You become calmer because you aren't fighting a daily war against your own neurochemistry. You become happier because you aren't manufacturing suffering through unchecked stories. And you become more successful because you can finally direct the full force of your intellect and energy toward your actual objectives.
It's incredible when you look at it like that.
It is a complete system of energy reclamation, and it's synthesized from just a few concise principles. So let's pull all of these threads together for you, the listener, and map the journey we've taken through Thibaut Meurisse's concepts.
Good idea.
We started by acknowledging the invisible operating system, the reality that subtle, unrecognized emotions act as the foundational filters for our decisions and our actions.
Right, and then we moved past the destructive instinct of suppression, We learned instead to act as the triage nurse, observing and labeling the emotional state to create a crucial buffer zone without absorbing the chaos.
Yes. And from there, we looked under the hood at the cognitive engine, realizing that external events are neutral until our own thoughts manufacture the stress and sadness. We learned that the narrative we choose is the lever that controls the physiological feeling.
We established the absolute boundary of our energy, too, recognizing that agonizing over the uncontrollable is a catastrophic waste of cognitive fuel,
Totally.
and that true power lies solely in taking responsibility for our deliberate reactions.
And finally, we explored how to make this entire framework sustainable. By building daily routines and positive habits, we neurologically pave the pathways of emotional balance, shifting the heavy lifting from conscious effort to automatic muscle memory.
Freeing up massive amounts of bandwidth for the pursuit of our own success. It really is a profound architectural blueprint for the mind.
It is, and it demands practical application.
Yeah.
So, to that end, I want to leave you with a specific mechanical question to consider as you step back into your day.
Okay.
We know that your energy is finite, that thoughts create feelings, and that you must focus only on what you can control. So, what is one specific, recurring negative narrative you are running today about a situation entirely outside of your control?
That's a tough one to face.
It is. And structurally speaking, what happens to your baseline stress level tomorrow if you simply make the unilateral decision to stop funding that story with your cognitive energy?
A brilliant focal point to carry forward.
Take that question, examine your internal narratives, and start reclaiming your bandwidth. We'll see you on the next deep dive.